Today I'm talking the Friday 13th franchise, going through theories, hot takes, and answering common questions that I always see posed about the Friday 13th franchise. Now, as always, if you like this video, please hit the like button, the thumbs up. Please subscribe if you have not. And in the comments, feel free to let me know your Friday 13th hot takes, your theories, and any comments you have about this video. So let's get right into it. Theory question number one. Was Jason around during the events of the original Friday 13th? Well, listen, obviously, Pamela Voorhees is the killer in the original Friday 13th. That's what's in the script. That's what we see in the actual movie. But there are some things that make it seem like maybe she was getting some assistance. My partner in crime, Nick Arcana, pointed out that when Annie gets her throat slit in the woods, he thinks that is a man's boots walking in the woods. So conceivably that maybe suggests that might be Jason, but then that would mean that Jason was actually driving the Jeep. So I can't get on board with that because we don't see any evidence from the rest of the movies that Jason can actually drive. So I don't think that's necessarily the case. But there are also things in the movie that suggest that maybe the killer had more physical strength than what we're seeing from Pamela Voorhees. I mean, hanging a body up in a doorway, that's not easy. That takes a lot. And, in terms of the killer appearing in different locations and time-wise, does it make sense if there's not a second killer? I don't know. If you watch the movie with a very attentive eye to the idea of is there a second killer, you might come away thinking like this makes a lot more sense if there's a second killer. But does that mean that Jason was alive and well and helping Pamela Voorhees? I don't think so. It doesn't seem to ring true to me. But we do know that in the canon that Jason knows that Alice killed his mother, so he saw his mother get beheaded. So Jason is there at the end of the original Friday 13th, somewhere lurking in the woods, in the shadows, sees what happens between Alice and Miss Voorhees, and then eventually, of course, goes to take revenge on Alice in the beginning of part 2. So Jason is sort of there, but did Pamela know that he was alive? I don't think so. I think that the most... Well, let's trace backwards. So we have to go back to the idea of did Jason actually drown when he was a kid? Because even that, the mythology is all over the place in Friday the 13th in terms of did he actually die? Did he swim up to the other end of the lake and then just raise himself in the woods? Raised by the wolves in the woods, building shacks, living off of dead animals, becoming a hunter, a real man of the woods, Jason Voorhees. Or is he a ghost? I mean, did he drown and come back as a ghost? I don't know. Both, the franchise does not do a good job establishing what is the canon and what is the lore. It's kind of all over the place. But what makes the most sense to me, I've talked about in past videos, is the idea that Pamela Voorhees did some kind of voodoo, some kind of magic in an attempt to bring Jason back to life. And in her own mind, it had failed. She did some kind of spell, some kind of voodoo, some kind of ritual, and then she just didn't see Jason. She thought that it had failed. So she continued her plot to take revenge on Camp Crystal Lake, kill all the counselors in part 1, kill Steve Christie, the whole fight with Alice. She went ahead with her plan because she thought that Jason was dead, gone, and that her attempt to bring him back to life had failed. But what she doesn't know is that it did not fail, it succeeded. And at some point afterwards, during the events of part 1, Jason does come back to life. Adult Jason, back to life, has no idea what's going on, and that version of Jason stumbles through the woods right in time just to see his mom, his beloved mother, beloved by Jason only, get beheaded by Alice. So he caught the tail end of part 1, as we did, and then, of course, from there, Jason's whole plight takes off, hearing mommy's voice in his head telling him to kill, feeling like Crystal Lake is his ground, his area to protect, feeling protective over the campgrounds, and we have a franchise from there. So just to recap that, I think Jason was sort of there during the events of part 1 at the very end, came back to life through some kind of ritual, saw Alice behead his mom, but he wasn't actually actively working with Miss Voorhees. I don't think Miss Voorhees would have the same level of rage, the same contempt and mission for revenge if Jason was still alive and she knew it. All right, moving on. Lake itself haunted. Now, this is a very interesting thing that I had never ever thought about until I saw the question posed, I believe, on the Friday 13th Reddit. Someone had a theory about this, and it does explain a lot. If you just go with the idea of nothing else beyond just the lake itself is haunted, there's something magical about the lake, and Jason as a boy drawing that lake made him come back to life as a killer, as an adult. All that stuff can stem from just the lake being haunted. And it could explain some other things as well. I mean, you think about the idea of when Jason's in the lake at the end of part 6, part 7, things keep happening that bring him back to life. Lightning striking All this stuff keeps happening to bring him back to life, which makes sense if the lake has some kind of power. And do you think about the idea of Tina's father in part seven, old, undecomposed, perfectly in good condition? Looks like he took a brief swim in the water and is coming back up for air. Tina's father at the end of part seven. That whole explanation of him coming back to life and pulling Jason down, that makes sense if the river, the water, the lake is actually a magically cursed lake. So I'm really surprised that no Friday the 13th filmmaker sort of went down that route. I guess it is a little bit much to try to explain that. You're trying to still stay grounded in reality, not go full blown fantasy. But if there was a lore introduced that Crystal Lake itself is haunted, I think when you think back to past events and all the movies, it does kind of tie it together and make it seem like, okay, I can sort of see that. Maybe have a flashback to Roy Burns going skinny dipping in the damn Crystal Lake, and then he comes out determined to kill as well. Who knows? I mean, it makes sense to me that Crystal Lake, there's something up with that. So, how did Jason find Alice in Friday the 13th Part 2? Well, Alice at the beginning of part two is doing it's kind of a survivor trope of like, let me go back to the place where I was attacked, where the trauma happened, and let me go back there and confront the fear, and it'll help me get over it by just confronting that, and then I can move on my life. I've never seen it actually work in any kind of horror movie situation. Alice coming back to the scene of the crime where all that stuff from part one happened seems like a very crucial mistake. We cut to the opening of Friday the 13th Part 2. She's in a house in a neighborhood that I believe is somewhere near Crystal Lake. But from the novelization, it's explained that in the previous days before that, she had gone to Crystal Lake, had sort of walked around, just revisited the site, maybe taking in the memories of when her and friends were there, when she found dead bodies hanging from doors. Why would you want to go back there, Alice? I don't know. Why do you think this is going to be a healing thing? I don't know. But somewhere in that, unfortunately for her, as she's like doing a damn kid's tour of Crystal Lake, Jason in the woods sees her and says, "Hey, that's the damn girl that killed my mom. She beheaded my mom. And what are the odds? I have nothing but revenge on my mind, and here she is in the flesh." Now, let's say Alice managed to escape there without Jason getting to her. But the idea is that Jason followed her back from Crystal Lake to this house that's somewhere in the vicinity of Crystal Lake. And now he's going to just walk in the neighborhood with the sack on, with the sack off. I don't know. I always question, where the hell is neighborhood watch? Why is someone not looking out the damn neighborhood window and seeing Sackhead Jason or someone who looks like Jason without the mask walking through the neighborhood and not reporting that to the police? Either way, just bad luck for Alice that Jason happened to follow her back from Crystal Lake. That's the only that makes sense, because you can't tell me that Jason on his own, with no reason, just walked out of Crystal Lake with the idea of finding Alice and then looked her up in the phone book or happened to see her at the damn local grocery store. He had to follow her back from Crystal Lake. Bad luck for Alice. But moving on, did Paul die? Paul from part two. Famously, we don't know Paul's fate as we're left with Ginny screaming, "Where's Paul? Where's Paul? Paul, where's Paul?" And Friday 13th fans left for years trying to figure out the fate of Paul. Well, listen, I don't know. Is Paul alive? Is Paul dead? It's all, it's all theory, but I can tell you what the writer of the movie in Friday 13th Part 2, what the writer said in the book Camp Crystal Lake Memories. He said that from his writing perspective, Paul is dead. So he wrote the character to be dead. And that's from the writer's mouth. So I mean, it's hard to take something that's not in the movie as officially canon, but when the writer says that's his intent, I mean, that's as close to as gospel as we're gonna get. So, okay, did Jason sexually assault Chris in Friday the 13th Part 3? This one's kind of controversial because I've seen fans talk about this a lot in the past, and I don't know. I mean, in the movie, they just show Jason, sort of sneaking up on her, and then he's chasing her, and then you have a flashback cut back and forth. The movie's very careful not to show anything what happened. Now, obviously, Chris is traumatized by, just being attacked by someone in the woods, but it's never really talked or expressed that anything sexual happened. So, granted, at this time when they made the movie, they didn't really know what Jason was. So Jason wasn't a well-defined character by the time of part 3. So they could have gone down that route if they're just trying to make him, the biggest monster possible. But there's nothing in the movie to suggest that. So I think we have to leave that out of the canon. And then obviously nothing in the future movies after that would depict Jason as like someone who does that. I mean, he just goes in for the kill. He's a quick kill and move on type of guy, it seems. So I haven't seen anything suggest that Jason sexually assaults people or does anything like that, or even has that in his mind. And there's nothing in part 3 that really shows that. So I'm not putting that in my mind as the canon. Okay, is Jason a Deadite? Well, listen, we're talking about the origins of Jason. I guess we have to at least mention the Necronomicon being in Jason Goes to Hell right there in the house, right there. And everybody's, just taking the low-hanging fruit saying, maybe Jason's a Deadite. Now this explains everything. I mean, someone read a passage from the book and up came Jason just to do Deadite stuff, and this is just stupid. Anybody who believes this, watch the Evil Dead movies and watch the Friday the 13th movies and tell me where there's any similarity in characteristics or mannerisms or anything between the Deadites we know in the Evil Dead movies and Jason Voorhees. I don't see any damn similarities. I don't see anything outside of the stupid Necronomicon being on that table that suggests that Jason's a Deadite. And the director of Jason Goes to Hell, Adam Marcus, I know he's come out and said, like, yes, that's what I did. I made it so that Jason's a Deadite. He's like really leaning into it and taking ownership, but I just feel like most fans aren't buying it. I'm not buying it. It doesn't add up. He can say that, but unless a damn actual Evil Dead movie comes out and has that in the canon, that Jason is part of that mythology, then I'm not buying that at all. So, why did Jason board the boat in Jason Takes Manhattan? Well, listen, I've said myself that I think it's uncharacteristic of Jason to do that. I mean, Jason is the ultimate protector of Crystal Lake. He feels ownership over Crystal Lake. The general rule of the movies is if you come into Crystal Lake, you may die because Jason's there, pretending that it's his campground and he may kill you for, in his mind, trespassing on his property. Now, Jason on his property sees a big boat and just decides to hop on the boat. And listen, this is the premise of Jason Takes Manhattan. We have to get him on a boat so we can get him to Manhattan. So they have Jason just jump on the boat and say, "Wee, boat ride, Jason, yes." But no, it doesn't seem to fit anything that we know of Jason because think about this. Jason, at any point in time, could just exit Crystal Lake. He could walk out of Crystal Lake and then walk into the local town and start killing people, or just walk somewhere and kill people. He doesn't do that. And what's the reason? Well, best we can tell is that he likes being in his area. He likes being in Crystal Lake. He feels ownership there. That's his home. So is he going to get on a boat just traveling to unknown territory? I mean, I don't think so. But there was a very quick, easy story fix for this that they could have done. It's very simple. Jason needed to chase somebody onto the boat. So he's trying to kill somebody in Crystal Lake, as he does, but the person gets away and boards the boat. Jason boards the boat to find this person, kills the person, but then the boat's already moving. So now Jason settles in, puts on his life jacket, you know, gets himself a margarita, starts watching, listening to the Love Boat music, whatever that might be. But Jason needs a reason for me to get on the boat. And that reason is him chasing somebody onto the boat, and the boat's already moving then. Very simple, quick writing fix that would actually make that all make sense to me. Is it possible for Rob to be that quickly in the woods hunting Jason after Jason killed his sister in part two? Well, I don't know. It seems awfully quick for Rob to already be in the woods. He has a newspaper article with like a photograph rendering of what Jason looks like. I don't know. I have to revisit how long the timeline is between 2, 3, and 4. Because as a kid and teen, I thought it was just a few days separating 2, 3, and 4. And now it's almost more accepted that that's kind of like a 1 month period almost. Because I think understanding is that one thing to establish is that when Jason is at the hospital at the beginning of part 4, how long does it take him to get back to Crystal Lake? Because he's at the hospital, he kills 2 people, and then we just cut to daytime, and now Jason's at Crystal Lake. So was there like a time jump of a couple weeks? I don't know, because if I remember, like Trish and her mother are reading an article in the newspaper about Jason, the events of part 3, so it's fresh in the newspaper. So how long can that be? And I think we have an idea that part 3 is not far after part 2. So I really don't know what to make of Rob already being in the woods with this whole vendetta against Jason. To me, that feels like it would be maybe a month or 2 later. And I mean, because, your sister dies, you also have to, handle business there in terms of like her funeral, the grieving process, things like that. Would he already be out there knowing that Jason had taken her out and having all the backstory and stuff? It seemed very convenient for the story. But I don't know. Someone can let me know in the comments, like, what is the timeline of 2, 3, and 4? Is there enough time there for Rob to already be in the woods? That I just don't know. Was Roy possessed by Jason? No, I don't think so. I mean, if you want to make Jason Goes to Hell canon for this, then you could say that we didn't see it, but maybe Roy at some point ate Jason's heart and he became Jason. That's the only way that Jason is possessing Roy, if Roy eats his heart like it's a roast beef sandwich from Arby's, which we saw all throughout Jason Goes to Hell. No, Roy was not possessed by Jason. He was possessed by rage, by revenge, because Victor killed his son Joey, and Roy was not going to stop until he got revenge on well, no, he's not going to get any revenge on Victor. He's going to instead kill all the Talon people and kill everybody who did not kill his son Joey. And he's going to leave Victor in the jail to wait for his trial, if there's ever a trial, and just eat jail food. And we don't know what happened to Victor. So, well, whatever the case, do your thing, Roy. I mean, some people feel that's an amazing entry in the series. Doesn't make sense to me. What year does Friday the 13th Part 7 take place in? Okay, so Friday the 13th Parts 1 through 8. I mean, they're not known for their, continuity, their logical timeline progressions. Back then, Paramount was just popping those movies out year after year, different writers, different directors. They weren't thinking about the fan base. They weren't thinking about us 30 years later analyzing the timeline to see, does this make any sense? So with that in mind, you have a time jump from Jason Lives to Friday the 13th New Blood. Jason Lives, of course, is put at the bottom of the water, tied to a rock, Tommy having restored him to his original resting place, supposedly. So Jason's sitting down there, chilling in the water, and then at the beginning of Part 7 of New Blood, you have Tina as a child who is there having that whole thing with her father where she accidentally kills her father. Now, in that scene, for whatever reason, they show Jason at the bottom of the water. So this is all taking place after Jason Lives. So Tina as a kid is coinciding with Jason already being in the water. And then we have a time jump to Tina now, maybe 6, 7, 8 years later as a teenager. I mean, you got a pretty big damn time jump. I mean, I don't know, again, a very quick, easy writing fix is just don't show Jason at the beginning of Part 7 in the water. Show Tina killing her father, and then we can just say that, okay, that took place somewhere in Crystal Lake. It could have taken place even before the events of Part 6. It has nothing to do with Jason, so that could be way back in the day, and then Tina as a teenager can be immediately following the events of Part 6. But no, I mean, it's a big time jump because Jason's in the water while Tina's a kid. So best as we could trace it, me and Nick Arcana, we did a deep dive on Friday the 13th Part 7. Best as we could tell, Friday the 13th of New Blood takes place in the damn year 2000. Yes, 2000. And these kids come into the damn Crystal Lake in Friday the 13th Part 7, they should be worried about Y2K, not freaking coming to the damn campground. And they certainly don't dress like the 90s, let alone the 2000s. I mean, they dress very 80s. All the technology says 80s. And then Jason Takes Manhattan, which we know takes place after New Blood, then suggest that within Jason Takes Manhattan, you can see actually, there's a sign or something that says 1989. So it's it's all over the place. I don't know, but there's a big time jump between Jason Lives and New Blood that makes Friday the 13th Part 7 have to take place in the late 90s, early 2000s, which is absolutely ridiculous. Okay. Does Jason teleport in Jason Takes Manhattan? Well, hell yeah, he does. I mean, listen. Arguably, you could maybe make a convincing argument that he does also teleport in Jason Lives. You could make an argument that he teleports in New Blood. So Zombie Jason has his teleporting ability. It's very, very apparent in Jason Takes Manhattan that he's teleporting. They really throw it in our face as a viewer. Literally, he's down here at one point, he's already climbed up to somewhere at the next point. It's the editing, the filming. They're throwing in our face that this is not a Jason walking figure. This is a Jason teleporting figure. Me and Nick Arcana have since labeled it horrorportation. And a lot of slashers have it. We've seen it in I Know You Did Last Summer. We've seen it in the Scream movies. At least the Scream movies typically have two killers, though, to help explain it. But horrorportation, common thing. You notice it with a lot of slasher movies. Okay. Is Jason Goes to Hell canon with the first 8 movies? I used to think so. I used to think that Jason Goes to Hell was just taking place after Jason Takes Manhattan. It's been a couple years. And the key fun idea was the idea that Jason in Manhattan finally caught the attention of the FBI, of the government. You know, it's outside the Crystal Lake jurisdiction. So now them knowing about Jason being in Manhattan, now it makes sense they start paying attention and finally do a damn sting operation in Camp Crystal Lake and take out Jason. So it makes a lot of sense that the events of Jason Takes Manhattan brings about the beginning of Jason Goes to Hell. But the story in Jason Goes to Hell is so wild that I just don't think it fits anywhere with the rest of the series in terms of canon. First thing, the body hopping thing. If the body hopping thing was a thing, then you just feel like you can't do that 9 movies in. You can't have an established killer for that many movies, and then you introduce an entire new thing that he does. It doesn't add up with the first 8 movies. Crane Duke is talking about remember me. Where in the history of this franchise would Crane Duke have been where he would have had some kind of battle with Jason? I don't know. Jason has a sister and a niece and all this stuff. I don't think Jason Goes to Hell goes well canon wise with the first 8 movies. I know a lot of people probably want it to be canon, want it to be like just a continuation, of course. But I think 1 through 8, to be honest, is like their own thing. I think the New Line movies are sort of a new canon for Jason, a new timeline. Just my opinion. You can take those movies however you want to take it. I think they're 2 separate timelines because nothing in Jason Goes to Hell makes sense with the 8 movies before that. Is Jason that is dug up in Jason Lives, is that actually Roy? I've heard this before, that somehow the graves got mixed up and that's actually Roy Burns. And one of the reasons this actually sort of is kind of fun to think about is because Jason, the first 4 movies, is running around. He runs fast. He makes noises. He's totally different from Zombie Jason. Zombie Jason walks slowly, doesn't talk, doesn't react, doesn't feel pain. But then you look at Roy in Friday the 13th Part 5, and Roy in Part 5 is like acting like Zombie Jason. He, same thing, walks slow, doesn't react to pain, doesn't talk. So Jason's mannerisms as Zombie Jason does seem like it could be Roy Burns. To be honest, it's more characteristic of Roy Burns than it is Jason from the first 4 movies. But I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say that's definitely Jason Voorhees. There's nothing in the movie or the canon besides that point I just made that could point to that. It's fun to think about though. Why are the kids in Part 7 still oblivious to Jason? Okay, in Part 6 they had changed the name of the lake to Camp Fourscreen, and even then, the camp counselors that come there, they know about Jason. They're talking about Jason. They're aware of it. So the town had tried to cover things up by changing the name. But for whatever reason, by the time we get to Part 7, they've changed the name back to Camp Crystal Lake. So these kids know it's Crystal Lake. I just think that every single movie you're doing this thing where the group of kids come to the lake and unsuspectingly get killed by Jason. By the time you get to Part 7, you're really stretching the realm of believability that these kids aren't aware that there's a damn killer in this area and that many deaths have happened in that area. It's not going to be the casual teenage weekend trip hangout that Part 7 leads us to believe it is, where everybody just casually is doing their own thing. They would know something about Jason, or their parents would know something about Jason. Someone would have heard something. It would have, unless they came from way out of town. But I don't see it. I think that it doesn't make really any sense that these kids don't know about Jason. Okay, that's all I got for today. Part 1 of my theories and questions answered about the Friday the 13th series. There's so many movies in the franchise, so many theories, so many things to address that there'll be a Part 2 coming soon. And again, if you like the video, please let me know in the comments your theories, your questions, and leave some theories and I'll be able to address those in Part 2 of the video. Until next time, you guys take care.